Hello and welcome to the RevEx Social Distancing Small Table Show. This is our fourth episode. My button, Trump, not my president. And my button, insist on a registered nurse, especially right now. Okay. My button today says, if you can read this, you're not the president. And this was originally a Bush pin. It was from back in re-election, so it was would have been the 2004 election cycle. But the story still applies. The current president can't read this either. He'd be like, if you can't read this, if you can't read this, if you can't read this or read this, then you're not. Yeah, so, yeah, whatever. And then my button, which you can't even see, is Taskmaster.
She said.
Who appears in the upcoming Black Widow film. He won't look anything like this in the Black Widow film, but this is what he looked like in the comics. So that's enough for today. And my button is SaveTheInternet.com, more relevant than ever at the moment. And as always, I'm dressed in my Pepperdine graduate jersey. All right. And my button is a promotional button for the movie Chicken Run on video way back in the day. My button, Johnny Cash Museum. You'll see very quickly why Johnny Cash is the button. But there's never a time when Johnny Cash is the wrong answer. So, the button, Think Before You Love, which is one I believe that we got for a STD education campaign in college, I think is where this one is from. When we gave these out and we did them for like STD Awareness Week. And it was either a program that was sponsored when I was SGA president or that... as an advisor, one of those things. Somewhere along the way, there was an event, I'm pretty sure it was a student event, raising awareness about, proper practices and giving out condoms and all this. And this was one of the buttons from it, Think Before You Love, which, whether you use the word love there or not at the end, is still really relevant right now. So think before you whatever. And my button is from Fajesca. It's a Florida thing here. It's hard to see, but it's a map of the state. And if you look clearly, it says... always at the top, District 1, and District 1 is the Panhandle and where the star is and the capital and where I was from. And then the year after this, I became the district coordinator of District 1, which is number 1. It's always at the top. But at the same time that I won, the people in Miami voted to switch the districts, and South Up became District 1. So I became the chair of District 4, not District 1, despite this saying always on top. And my button is... Vote Democratic, the ass you save may be your own, which is more relevant than ever. And then my button, Buckfush, will come up in just a minute, relevant to the song I'm about to do. I'm your host, Professor X, and today my button is Netroots Nation from Tiger Eye Designs, the biggest button I've ever seen in my life. This one says the grand old party, except that, if you look close enough... Dikembe Mutombo has swatted the crap out of the grand, and it just says old party. But also this button is going to break my shirt and rip holes in it because it's so big. It's like it's like the Flava Flav of buttons. And if you want one, that's tigereyedesign.com. This was a demo that came out at Netroots Nation. My button, if you can see really close there, you probably can't. It's Wolverine, but it's like really super scary Wolverine from, the black and silver X-Force days. So he's very scary there. The Murder Squad Wolverine. All right. And my button, if you can see it closely enough, it's hard to see because it won't stay on, but it says Jack White. It'd be easier to see if it wasn't the hardest button to button. And my button, Save Our Science, Save Our Schools, probably, it's not on there, but Save Our Asses, I guess, as well. If you save the science, you save the rest. It's kind of a trickle-down thing that works because trickle-down doesn't work. All right. Today, my t-shirt is clearly... Dark Phoenix, and if you look closer, my button is also Dark Phoenix. All right, and then my button, if you can see it over there, is an actual real button from the '96 Olympics in Atlanta. My button, since we're not at Busboys and Poets, we can still wear buttons like we were. It says, "Keep your theocracy off my democracy." Yeah, all right. My button, if you can see it really close, it's a picture of George Bush and George Washington. One says, Can't tell a lie. The other says can. And my hands are way too shaky from delirium tremens for you to be able to read it. And so I'll put it back on. But let's just say story still applies with the current president. Not on the George Washington side. Black shirt with a white Hydra logo. I mean, you can't see it, though, because it's invisible. My button, however, you can see. Rock the vote. Oh, rock the vote. Make sure that while all the pandemic stuff is going on, you don't forget that this is an election year and it's important to vote. Make sure you're registered now. Make sure that everybody you know is registered. And double check that, because one of the things they've been doing in the last couple of election cycles is kicking people off the voting rolls who think they're registered to vote. So make sure that you are registered. Make sure your friends are registered. So we can rock that vote. And my button, speaking of presidential candidates, is an authentic from the 80s, 1984, Jesse Jackson for President 1984 campaign button. If I haven't mentioned before, my dad used to do some kind of Storage Wars kind of things before that, before Storage Wars was a TV show. And of when he would find stuff in these various sheds that he would bid upon, he would give me things that were political or musical or cool or fun or whatever. So this came out of a shed and is an actual, came along with a trove of other buttons and other things you may see at another time. So my button, if you can't see it, is a PBR little button there, and there'll be a reference to that later. PBR was my favorite beer before it turns out that I'm allergic to beer and all other wheat-related products. And my button is Chris Kingsley for County Commission, which this was a button for the first campaign that I ever worked on as a volunteer in this case. I did like 10, 15 hours a week in 2004. And Chris went on to win County Commission that year and would later become the chair of the County Commission after that campaign. But I moved back to Tallahassee at that point and worked on campaigns every 2 years after that up until 2012. And this one was the only time that I wasn't a director or manager level on the campaigns. Then I moved to AFL, where the shirt came from. So I still work on campaigns every 2 years. It's just not in positions of authority. I just have to do creative now. So much better for me personally. All right. And my button says, go make history. Zoom in on that. Alfred? Who's on camera tonight? Alfred? No? All right. And then my button, it says, it's a little water stained and it's old as hell. So if you can't quite read it, it says, red and white is dynamite. And that's related to my high school. We'll come back to that in a little bit later. Separate from that, my button today is, oh yeah. And the message behind this one is, oh yeah. And then my button is savetheinternet.com. Which, if you didn't save the internet, how would you be able to watch such amazing, fine videos as these? My t-shirt, Batman. My button, oh, the Joker. Also, Scott Snyder era, New 52, like the Court of the Owls there. Obviously, I'm a big fan. All right. My button, X-Files. I think this is actually from the Fight the Future movie. We were selling these. This is, I think, from the DVD release of that when I worked at a bookstore. My button says, Soy Amanda, because fuck it, Soy Amanda. Yo soy Amanda, we soy Amanda, everybody soys Amanda. And my button is Obama. I've decided that since it's an election year, I'm going to make sure to remind you all of that every time. And so I'm going to wear a button every time for a candidate that I'd rather vote for than Donald Trump. And Obama's an easy one on that scale. My button, more than Jake. No, like I said yesterday, my buttons are all going to be the rest of the time, are all going to be candidates that I would rather vote for than Donald Trump in the 2020 election. This one is a Clinton Gore 96 pin, so re-elect. But so I would vote for Gore or Clinton over Trump. So that's what that button is. All right. Which is actually thematically good with the button. The button, in this case, is actually the winning team button. It is Kerry for President and Betty Castor for U.S. Senate from 2004. And like I said, the series of buttons I'm wearing now is all basically presidential candidates I'd vote for ahead of our current president. And so we're down to, actually I'd vote for Betty Castor ahead of him too, even though that would be very unlikely. But certainly I'd vote for John Kerry over Trump 7 days a week, any day, whatever, 8, whatever. I don't know what the current amount of weekdays in a week is anymore. It's kind of lost all meaning. So, all right, continuing in my series of buttons of presidential candidates I'd vote for over Donald Trump. This is a Ready for Warren button, so that goes to before, I think it's even before 2016 that these buttons came out. There's a website too. So I think it's before, when she was still a senator, so, and before she ran for president. So my button, continuing my series of presidential candidates I'd vote for instead of Trump. This one goes back to 2016, Hillary Clinton. Not a question. Obviously, I'd vote for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. And my button is continuing the series of presidential candidates that I would vote for over Donald Trump. This one is Bob Graham from 2004. And Bob Graham, who is from Florida and was former governor there, is an early political hero of mine. I went to high school with one of his daughters, and then over the years, he was governor, did a great job. And then at the convention, this convention, in fact, the 2004 Democratic National Convention in Boston, the candidates, or the states, generally speaking, have a delegate breakfast. Every morning, you get up in the morning when you're there for the 4 or 5 days or whatever, you go to this delegate breakfast from your state. Sometimes they might be combined, but Florida is always a big one, so it was by itself. There was this massive room full of Floridians, many of whom I knew personally from around the state and stuff, that would be at the convention, and then speakers would come up there and speak to that group. Bob Graham was one of those. He was running for president, or he ran for president previously, one of those things. He had run for president, wasn't a serious contender for president, but was a long-standing, very serious and well-respected senator after leaving Florida as governor. Before he goes up on stage to give this speech to this morning breakfast, I got up there to get my picture taken with him. I was probably wearing this exact jacket, and I got there to get my picture taken with him, and he shook my hand, and then he wouldn't let go. He kept going and going. He kept talking to me. He was literally interested in everything I had to say. And then finally I pull away, and I don't like doing the fanboy thing, especially not with politicians. So I was just trying to get in there, get the picture, and get out. And after he talked to me, and this probably for 5 minutes, he wouldn't let go of my hand either. He sat there and was engaged, eye contact, everything. You don't get this from politicians nowadays very much. And then I went over and sat down, and he went up on stage to give his speech. And in his speech, he talked about me. It was random. He was he's always, one of his big things was education. At the time, I was a community college teacher, and I was at the convention as the advisor for the college Democrats from Tallahassee Community College. So that education conversation, he incorporated into the speech on stage, which was it was my first convention, my first really big political thing of any kind outside of the state of Florida. And then within a couple of minutes of being there, presidential candidates talking about me on stage. So yeah, definitely vote for him over Trump, not because of that. I mean, yes, because of that, but also because of the fact that, while he wasn't nearly as liberal as I am, he was smart, competent, honest, and really focused on helping the voters, not even the voters, the people of the state of Florida. So Bob Graham, rest in power. And then my president, my button today, again, continuing the series of candidates I would vote for over our current president. And this one is FDR, of course, not a shocker. All right, and then my button, continuing my series of presidents that I would vote for, presidential candidates I would vote for over Donald Trump. This one, I like Ike. I mean, I don't love Ike, but, he's the last sane Republican president, so I like him enough, but I'd certainly vote for him over Trump. So I like Ike for today. And then my button here, in my series of buttons of candidates I would vote for presidential candidates I would vote for over Trump, we have Harry Truman. My button is minor threat. Continuing the series of candidates I would vote for over Donald Trump is minor threat lead singer Ian Mackay. Will you vote for him over president? I would definitely do that. All right, so the button, as we've talked about before, is a continuation of the series of presidential candidates I would vote for ahead of Donald Trump. And if it'll focus in there, you can see that this one is George McGovern. I actually got to meet George McGovern. Back in the day, I used to be a co-host of a radio show with my old partner in crime, Allison Burke-Morano, Florida Progressive Radio, where we interviewed quite a few congressional candidates and other political people. And my top three congressional candidates who didn't win, but we got to interview and I wish would have won. Number one would have been Heather Whitley Bevan, not in order, but Heather Whitley Bevan, who was the one who actually introduced me to George McGovern personally. And meeting him was like meeting Jimmy Carter, sort of like meeting an icon, this presence, this person that was part of history. and it was like an experience. It was a thing. And Heather introduced me to him, and that was, I thank her for that forever. Second person in that trio would have been Jay McGovern. No relation as far as I can tell, but Jay ran for Congress in North Florida and was this very strong, very powerful candidate who didn't win. And then the third one, Doug Tudor, he passed away earlier before COVID hit. And Doug was a very important and powerful person to a lot of people in this world, and his voice and his presence and his personality is a big loss for the world. Now, today is Memorial Day, so technically this isn't a show related to the three people I just talked to, even though they all served. They are veterans. Even Doug, who passed away, was a veteran, so he didn't die in service, in combat, in action. So today, Memorial Day, is about those people who did die in service and in action. So it doesn't matter what my drink is today or what your drink is today, as long as we raise a toast for those who served and sacrificed their lives in service of their country. Salute.